What is the most enchanted golden apples they can generate in a single desert temple? In order to answer that question, we have to understand how Minecraft generates loot, and to do that, we have to understand binary and how Java generates random numbers. If you are familiar with binary, you can skip to the time on screen. Binary is another way to represent numbers, also known as base 2. The format that numbers are usually presented in is decimal, otherwise known as base 10, which means that each digit going from right to left represents a value of increasing powers of 10. Binary works the same way, but with the digits representing powers of 2. For example, the number 123 is 3 times 10 to the 0 plus 2 times 10 to the 1 plus 1 times 10 to the second. In binary, this is represented as 111111, where 2 to the 0 plus 2 to the 1 plus 2 to the 3 plus 2 to the 4 plus 2 to the 5 plus 2 to the 6. Each binary digit is referred to as a bit. Low bits refer to those on the right or those with the lowest value, and high bits or upper bits refer to those on the left or those with the greatest value. Due to the nature of the transistor, computers store and process data in binary, which is why we have to understand binary to answer our initial question. Before we go any further, we must also discuss the integer and long data types in Java. If you are familiar, you can again skip to the time on screen. When we see numbers written down, as humans we can use context to determine where one number ends and another begins. Computers, on the other hand, require some way to know where numbers stop and start. For Java, this means the integer and long data types. An integer is 32 bits and a long is 64 bits. Two important things to note are that because they have a finite number of possible values, these values can overflow. For example, if we stored 15 as an unsigned 4-bit data type and added 1, the value would become too large to fit in 4 bits. So what happens is that any bits larger than the capacity of the data type are dropped, so the result of 15 plus 1 would be 0. The other thing of note is that Java's ints and longs are assigned. In order to accommodate negative numbers, the uppermost bit represents whether or not a number is negative. Essentially, if the highest bit is 1, then the value of the number is the remaining 31 or 63 bits value minus 2 to the 32 or 2 to the 64, respectively. Now we will look at the Java random number generator. Loot generation only uses a few of its methods, so I will only be going over these. Each instance of the random generator has a 48-bit internal seed. It's actually a long, but whenever it is updated, only the lower 48 bits are kept, so I'll be treating it as an unsigned 48-bit data type. When this seed is first set, it is XORed by a constant. XOR is a bitwise logic operator that returns 1 if the inputs are different and 0 otherwise. XOR is reversible, as in A XOR B equals A, so it won't be much of a concern. The method next updates the seed by multiplying it by a constant and then adding another constant and returning the lowest 48 bits. This is what is known as a linear congruential generator, and for each pair of constants there exists another pair of constants that form a different LCG, which is essentially the inverse. It will take the output of the first LCG and return the input. Next it then returns the uppermost n bits of the updated seed, where n is its given parameter. Now we look at the function nextInt. If the parameter is 2 to the mth power, it is equivalent to nextm. Otherwise, it returns next31 modulus the parameter. Technically, if this call of next31 is too close to 2 to the 31, then in order to ensure uniform distribution, another next call will be made. Since we're only calling nextInt on small numbers, this chance is essentially negligible. NextLong returns next32 bit shifted left by 32, plus another next32. This was a pain to deal with because of the possibility of overflow in multiple places. Almost every aspect of Minecraft's world generator is deterministic, and therefore we can figure out how to get it to output the results we want. Each chunk, or 16 by 16 block area, has a population seed that depends solely on the world seed and chunk's coordinates. A small salt, which is 40,003 for desert pyramids, is added to the population seed, and then an instance of the Java random LCG is seeded with the result. Then for each of the 4 chests, a next long call is made to that instance to produce what I call the loot seed. I will discuss how each of these steps can be reversed later, but for now, we just need to know that they can be reversed. Because we're looking for a specific result, it's more efficient to only focus on the loot seed for now. The loot generator is seeded by the functions shown on screen, which I will go into more depth on later. An important thing to remember is that although longs hold 64 bits, the Java random LCG only depends on the lowest 48 bits. Now we can finally examine the actual loot generation. Each type of loot chest has a loot table, which you can find by renaming the Minecraft jar from the versions folder to a .zip, extracting it, and then going to Data, Minecraft, Loot Tables, Chests, and then the corresponding JSON. We only care about the desert pyramid, so we will open its loot table. Loot tables are broken down into pools, which contain any number of items, each of which has a weight and a range for its quantity. Additionally, each pool has a range for the number of times it is drawn from. Enchanted golden apples are located in the first loot pool, which has a range of 2 to 4 rolls, and the notch apples have a weight of 2 and a quantity of 1. To determine the loot, an instance of the Java random number generator is seeded with the loot seed. For picking the number of rolls of a pool or the number of items, the value nextInt of max minus min plus 1 plus min is chosen. If max and min are the same, this call to the random instance is skipped. For choosing which of a pool's items will be given, a nextInt call is made with the parameter being the total weight of that pool's items. Then for each item in the pool, the result of that call is decremented by the weight of the item, and once the result becomes negative, the current item is selected. The Java random generator's nextInt function has a weakness, whereby nextInt calls with a parameter that is divisible by 2 to the nth power, but is not a perfect power of 2, only depend on the lower 17 plus n bits of the seed. The total weight of the first loot pool is 232, which is divisible by 8. For a notch apple to be selected, the random instance must return 215 or 216 for 4 consecutive calls of nextInt 232. For a chest to have the greatest possible number of god apples for 4 consecutive iterations, the bits 18 to 20 of the seed must be either 000 or 111. This gives us an expected 8 bits of information for 4,096 expected values of the lowest 20 bits. When we actually calculate the possible values, there are 4,063 of them. For each of these values, I iterate through each of the possible approximately 270 million upper 28 bits and test if the corresponding seed gives the desired values of nextInt 3 equal to 2, and then the 4 consecutive calls to nextInt 232 equaling 215 or 216. In hindsight, I could have saved time by not checking the call of nextInt 3 until after the calls to 232. This resulted in 514,030 possible loot seeds that gave 4 notch apples in one chest. This was the most computationally expensive step, having to check about 1.1 trillion seeds and taking around 4 to 6 hours. Without exploiting the aforementioned weakness of the Java random LCG, this would have been over 280 trillion seeds and would have taken nearly 2 months. These seeds are the lower 48 bits of a next long call, and I want to know the internal seed of the random object that generated this long. If a random object starts with seed S, next long updates the seed to S prime, then to S prime prime, and returns the upper 32 bits of S prime prime appended to the middle 16 bits of S prime. This means that we can check all 65,536 possibilities for the lower 16 bits of S prime prime, step it back using the inverse function of the LCG, and see if the middle 16 bits match what is expected of S prime. If they do, we step it back again and have the initial seed. Note that it is possible for the lower 48 bits of next long to have 0, 1, or 2 valid initial seeds. At this point, I should elaborate on how to step back the LCG. As I mentioned previously, every LCG has an inverse with the same modulus. If the first LCG returns AX plus B mod M, and the inverse returns SX plus T mod M, then S times AX plus B plus T equals X mod M, meaning that A times S equals to 1 modulus M, and B times S equals negative T mod M. Rewriting the first equation as A times S equals 1 plus M times K, S can be solved for using the extended Euclidean algorithm. It then becomes trivial to find T. Finding all possible initial states that produce a desired loot seed on the first next long call, we find 513,117 such states. This computation was much quicker, only checking about 34 billion states. However, the Desert Temple has 4 loot chests, and each one is seeded by a new next long call. So since each next long call updates the internal state twice, after reversing the next long, we can step the generator back either another 0, 2, 4, or 6 times. Note that when the Java random object is seeded, the seed is actually the value given to it zeroed with a constant, and that the value passed to the seed function is actually 40,003 greater than the chunk's population seed. However, both of these operations are trivial to reverse. That said, we now have 2,056,468 population seeds that would produce at least one chest with 4 god apples. This is a small enough number that we can simply calculate all 4 chests loot for each population seed and add up the total number of e-gaps. We end up with 104 compared to an expected 115.3 population seeds that produce 7 notch apples, and none that produce more than that. Statistically, we can expect an average of 1.67 population seeds that both give 8 notch apples total and have 4 in one chest, and an 82% chance of having at least one. Unfortunately, we have a maximum of 7 total enchanted golden apples, where one chest has 4. So far, I have only discussed seeds giving at least one chest with 4 notch apples. The obvious solution is to find loot seeds that give chests with 3. However, this is not viable. For one thing, the parity weakness I mentioned becomes less effective, so I would have to process about 22 trillion seeds, taking 5 days. Although that may not seem unreasonable at first, I would expect about 300 million valid seeds, which is so large that subsequent calculations would become unfeasibly expensive. Therefore, the most likely maximum is 8, with there being a 99.996 chance that at least one population seed will produce such a temple. There's a 6.1% chance of a temple with 9, and the chance of a temple with 10 is so small that it cannot be calculated using Python floats. However, we can still find a temple with 7 notch apples, which is to my knowledge the greatest amount currently known. We need to find a combination of inputs, which are the world seed and the x and z coordinates, that produce the desired population seed. The only constraint on these inputs is that x and z must be between positive and negative 30 million, which is the world border, and that x and z must both be divisible by 16, because the population seed is calculated at the 0,0 corner of a chunk. Although it might seem like it is easier to pick an x and z than find the world seed that produces the desired output, due to the Zora operation and the job of random calls, it is actually much easier to pick a world seed and find an x and z within the world that meet the conditions. With a known world seed and output, this is equivalent to solving a times x plus b times z equals to c mod m. Using the extended Euclidean algorithm I mentioned earlier, we can create a function that produces a valid z for any input x. I exploited a property of the last 4 bits to satisfy the divisibility requirement, so the only requirement left is the valid range. I simply iterated through all 3.75 million possible x values to see if the corresponding z value is in the valid range. Coincidentally, each world seed has almost exactly 0.8 such x-z pairs on average. The last thing that must be addressed is that each region, or a 32 by 32 chunk area, only generates one pyramid, so I have to check about 1,280 world seeds before finding one that not only has a chunk with the desired population seed, but for which that chunk will generate a desert temple. In C, it takes anywhere from 5 seconds to a minute usually to reverse a population seed. Finally, we need to make sure that the given coordinates are in a desert biome. Fortunately, biome calculations use a Perlin noise function that uses all 64 bits of the world seed, so we simply iterate through possibilities for the upper 16 bits until a seed is found, giving the desired biome. Reversing one of the 104 population seeds we have, we get that the seed 1,512,000,008 has a temple with 7 enchanted golden apples located at negative 23,701,840, negative 6,232,560. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to smash the report button.